My brothers and sisters, life has a way of exposing the truth that hides behind smooth words and well-polished appearances. You see, when a woman begins to step outside of the sacred boundaries of faithfulness, when her loyalty shifts away from the covenant she promised before God, her mouth starts to give her away. She doesn't even realize it, but what she says, how she says it, and the spirit behind it all begins to uncover the condition of her heart. Words are powerful. They are the windows into the soul. The tongue doesn't lie for long. It will betray what the heart is concealing. And when faithfulness is no longer rooted in her character, her speech will carry the evidence of compromise. There are certain phrases, certain excuses, certain patterns that slip out, and they all point to the same root issue, an unfaithful heart. You cannot hide what you truly are becoming, because eventually the tongue will broadcast it. A woman in that state begins to normalize what should never be normal. She begins to rationalize what should never be rationalized. She begins to trivialize what should never be trivialized. That sounds harmless, even empowering, but beneath it is the seed of discontentment. When you are operating under the banner of loyalty, gratitude governs your heart. You may desire growth. You may desire improvement, but you remain thankful for what you have and who you are with. But when discontentment creeps in, it whispers that what God has given you isn't enough. The moment she says, I deserve better, she is setting herself above the vow she made, above the patience needed in relationships, above the grace required to endure. That one phrase is the language of entitlement. It says, I will not invest. I will not wait. I will not build. I will abandon. And before she even knows it, her words have become a declaration of rebellion against covenant love. Now, at face value, this looks like an observation. But what it really signals is the absence of effort. People don't grow apart because the bond is naturally. They grow apart because one or both parties stopped watering the soil. No plant grows without care. No tree stands firm without roots. To say, we've grown apart is to confess that intention, and priority have been shifted elsewhere. What is dangerous is that this phrase sounds polite. It almost sounds mature. But in reality, it's a justification for neglect. It is an attempt to dignify disloyalty with pretty words. There is a healthy form of space, rest, reflection, self-care. But when used in the context of unfaithfulness, it becomes a code word for detachment. It means I'm making room for something or sum the gap else, to fit be occupied by commitment. Space becomes a shield behind which secrets grow. Space becomes the excuse for silence, for coldness, for withdrawal. And eventually, that space is filled with the presence of another voice, another influence, another relationship. This is often said without effort to truly be understood. Instead of pursuing communication, she turns misunderstanding into justification for distance. When someone wants to be understood, they lean in, they explain, they open their heart. But when the heart has already turned away, you don't understand me, becomes a wall, not a bridge. It is the declaration that she is closing the door on intimacy, while opening the door to secrecy. Sin is never an accident. Unfaithfulness is never a random stumble. It begins with little compromises, small seeds of disobedience, unchecked conversations, wandering thoughts, and misplaced attention. To say, "It just happened," is to refuse accountability. It's the ultimate denial of the trail of choices that led there. That phrase is the language of avoidance. It's the attempt to paint a decision as a coincidence. These 5 phrases are not just words. They are indicators of the heart. They are warning signs that reveal when loyalty is eroding, when covenant is being abandoned, when faithfulness is under attack. If you ever hear them, don't ignore them. If you ever say them, check your heart. Because God holds us accountable for both our actions and the words that flow from our lips. Faithfulness is not tested when everything is easy. It's tested when temptation whispers, when dissatisfaction rises, and when culture tells you that loyalty is outdated. Stay rooted in truth. Guard your words, for they are evidence of your heart. Protect your vows, because what you say today will reveal what you've been choosing all along. When the heart begins to grow restless, when discontent starts to creep in, you can hear it in the words that slip out. At first, it may sound like a simple expression of wanting more, but hidden inside is a spirit of entitlement that shifts the focus away from gratitude. Gratitude says, "This is what I've been given, and I will nurture." Entitlement says, "What I have is not enough, and I will abandon it if it doesn't satisfy me immediately." That small shift in perspective becomes the doorway through which unfaithfulness quietly walks in. The problem is not always with wanting improvement. There is nothing wrong with desiring growth, with hoping for a stronger bond, with longing for a deeper connection. But the danger lies in how that desire is expressed. Instead of working, investing, forgiving, and rebuilding, The mind convinces itself that the answer lies outside of the commitment. The lips reveal a spirit that has stopped appreciating what is present and has started magnifying what is missing. The blessings that once seemed obvious begin to fade into the background while the flaws take center stage. Suddenly, every weakness becomes unbearable. Every shortcoming feels like a heavy burden, and the joy that once defined the relationship is overshadowed by a constant sense of dissatisfaction. This is how the enemy works. He doesn't barge in with chaos. He whispers. He plants small seeds of discontent. He tells the restless heart, you could be happier elsewhere. You're missing out. You're not being treated as you should. And without realizing it, that whisper begins to take root. The tongue gives life to it, speaking dissatisfaction into the atmosphere. Words are powerful. They don't just reveal the heart, they shape it. Once spoken, those words reinforce the belief leaving is better than building, that running is easier than enduring. That's selfish. This is more satisfying than sacrifice. What makes this spirit even more destructive is that it shifts responsibility. Instead of asking, how can I be part of the solution? How can I bring life, patience, and love back into this? The focus turns outward. Blame becomes the default response. The problem is always someone else. The eyes stop looking inward for growth and start scanning outward for escape. This mindset convinces the heart that it has no role in the struggle, and in doing so, it robs the relationship of the possibility of restoration. But true maturity doesn't run when things get hard. True loyalty doesn't abandon at the first sign of imperfection. True love doesn't walk away simply because the season has grown difficult. Faithfulness recognizes that every blessing requires responsibility, every bond requires effort, and every commitment requires perseverance. To nurture something into greatness, you must remain steadfast even when the soil looks dry, because growth doesn't happen by leaving for new ground. Growth happens by watering the ground you already stand on. The words of discontent also twist the meaning of self-worth. It is true that every person deserves to be valued, honored, and loved, but there is a difference between holding your worth with dignity and using it as a weapon. To honor your worth means to stand against abuse, to reject disrespect, to maintain integrity. To weaponize your worth means to use it as an excuse to dismiss, devalue, and abandon whenever expectations aren't met. One path builds strength, the other breeds arrogance. When spoken carelessly, words of dissatisfaction cross that line. They no longer reflect healthy self-respect, but reveal a heart that has turned inward, consumed by pride rather than shaped by love. Another hidden danger is the emotional detachment those words create. Long before actions confirm betrayal, the speech exposes the truth. The person may still be present in body, but their heart has already begun to exit. Conversations are colder. Attention is scattered. Priorities are shifted. And every time dissatisfaction is spoken, it pushes the heart further away from loyalty and closer toward unfaithfulness. The bond that once was sacred begins to unravel, not with one dramatic event, but with a slow, consistent repetition of careless words. It's important to recognize that sometimes what feels insufficient is actually the very place where growth is meant to happen. Struggles are classrooms, not cages. Challenges are opportunities for patience, not punishments for endurance. To walk away too soon is to abandon the lesson before it's complete. What seems lacking may be the very soil that, if watered with faithfulness, produces the fruit of a stronger, deeper, unshakable bond. The tragedy of discontent is that it blinds the eyes to the hidden potential of what already exists. That's why unchecked speech of entitlement must be confronted immediately. Left unchallenged, it disguises rebellion in the clothing of self. Carrot sounds wise, but it leads to ruin. It looks like strength, but it breeds weakness. It appears as self-respect, but it erodes covenant love. Words must be weighed carefully, because they not only reveal the condition of the heart, but also direct its course. The truth is, power doesn't come from complaining about what is lacking. Power comes from building what is broken. Power comes from choosing to see the good, even in seasons of lack. Power comes from rolling up your sleeves and saying, I will invest, I will endure, I will love, I will nurture. Because when loyalty is your foundation, when patience becomes your posture, when gratitude governs your words, what seems insufficient can be transformed into something extraordinary. And in that transformation, you discover that better was never out there. It was waiting to be bright here. Would you like me to continue expanding Keynote 2 in the same style and length? You said, expand Keynote 2 in 800 words without headings. Conclusion. ChatGPT said, when people drift away from loyalty, they often dress their reasoning in polite words that sound reasonable on the surface, but carry deeper truths underneath. One of those common ways of speaking is to say that the bond has simply changed. That time has taken them in different directions, that somehow distance has quietly built itself without effort or intention. It sounds soft, even mature, but what it often reveals is a lack of care. Nothing in life drifts into strength. No tree grows without water. No fire burns without fuel. No relationship thrives without attention. To claim that separation just occurred is really to confess that was abandoned long before words made it clear. The truth is that closeness is never automatic. It is cultivated, just like a garden left unattended becomes overrun with weeds. A bond left unattended will always weaken. It does not happen because of fate or some invisible hand pulling two souls apart. It happens because silence was chosen instead of conversation, because resentment was allowed to fester instead of being released, because investment was neglected in favor of distractions. To say that distance just happened is to remove responsibility from the one who chose not to engage, who chose not to prioritize, who chose to let the weeds take over. What makes this reasoning so deceptive is that it feels dignified. It does not sound like abandonment. It sounds like an observation of life. But beneath it is a deep unwillingness to own the truth that closeness requires effort, and effort was withdrawn. A relationship doesn't crumble overnight. It weakens one choice at a time. A missed opportunity to listen. A decision to remain silent when honesty was needed. A preference for other voices over the one that used to matter most. Each small decision builds the gap until it feels too wide to cross. And then the statement is made that things just grew apart. But there was nothing automatic about it. It was chosen. It is important to see how dangerous this way of speaking is, because it dignifies neglect. It gives abandonment a noble cover. Instead of admitting, I stopped showing up, I stopped caring, I stopped fighting for what we promised, the words make it sound as though circumstances, not choices, are to blame. Yet deep down, the truth remains: where energy is invested, connection always grows. Where attention is focused, love always strengthens. To grow apart means one or both parties turned their focus elsewhere. The heart drifted not because of time, but because of neglect. When dissatisfaction takes root, this phrase becomes a weapon. It is used not only to excuse withdrawal, but also to silence the other person. It says, in effect, this isn't worth saving because the change has already happened. It presents the situation as final when, in reality, much could still be redeemed if humility and effort were applied. But once these words are spoken, they often become the end of the fight. The heart that says them has usually already decided to lacerate. Fulfillment, using polite language to soften, what is essentially disloyalty. The irony is that many who speak this way later find themselves repeating the same story in a new place, because the issue was never simply with the other person. The issue was the lack of consistent nurture, the unwillingness to endure seasons of difficulty, the refusal to do the hard work of communication and patience without confronting those weaknesses. The same pattern repeats. New beginnings look promising, but neglect soon follows, and the same words are used again. What was called growing apart is in reality the habit letting go too easily. But it doesn't have to be this way. There is a better response than surrender. There is another choice besides labeling neglect as inevitability. A bond can be repaired when both parties choose to return to the basics. Conversation, attention, forgiveness, patience, intentionality. Just as a dry plant can come back to life when it is watered, so too can a relationship be revived when effort is poured back into it. But that can only happen when honesty replaces excuses, when the truth of neglect is admitted and responsibility is embraced. Words matter because they shape the heart. If you say you have grown apart, you accept distance as permanent. But if you say, we need to rebuild, we need to reconnect, we need to water what has been drying out, then the heart is moved toward restoration instead of resignation. That small shift changes everything. It turns excuses into accountability and turns distance into an opportunity for growth. The great tragedy of claiming separation as natural is that blinds people to the power of choice. It convinces them that time or circumstances have more authority than their own decisions. But that is never true. People choose where they place their energy. They choose who they prioritize. They choose whether to invest or neglect. And those choices always bear fruit, whether in closeness or in distance. To admit that truth is uncomfortable, but it is also liberating because it means what has been weakened can be made strong again if choices are redirected. So, when those words are spoken, they should not be left unchallenged. They should prompt reflection. Did I stop showing up? Did I stop listening? Did I allow distractions to replace dedication? And if the answer is yes, then the solution is not to label the distance inevitable, but to recommit to the work of rebuilding. Because nothing grows apart without neglect, and nothing grows together without intentional love. The bond may have weakened, but with faithfulness, humility, and renewed effort, what seems broken can still be restored. Do you want me to now expand Keynote 3 in the same 800 word style as well? You said, Expand keynote 3 in 800 words without head engine. ChatGPT said, there comes a time when words are used as a shield, not because the heart truly needs healing, but because the heart is searching for a way to detach. One of the most subtle ways this happens is when someone begins to claim they simply need more room, more distance, more time to themselves. On the surface, it may sound reasonable, even healthy, because everyone deserves moments of rest and quiet. Every soul benefits from reflection, solitude, and space for personal growth. But there is a difference between stepping away for renewal and stepping away for escape. When those words are used to justify pulling back from covenant, they are no longer about restoration. They are about withdrawal. What is really being created is not healthy breathing room, but an empty gap waiting to be filled with something or someone else. The idea of space becomes convenient because it feels less confrontational. It doesn't accuse anyone directly. It doesn't admit to wrongdoing, and it doesn't sound like betrayal. Yet beneath the surface, it carries the intention of emotional detachment. It allows one to keep physical presence while building emotional walls. It's a way of saying, I no longer wish to engage, but I also don't want to confront the truth. This hidden meaning is what makes it so destructive. It becomes a cover for secrecy, a place where silence can grow and intimacy can die. At first, the gap may seem small, a little less conversation, a little less warmth, a little less engagement. It may be explained away as busyness or stress, but if left unchecked, it expands. The distance becomes a normal rhythm. What used to be shared is now kept private. What used to be open is now closed. And into that empty space, he moves. Other influences can quietly slip in. A voice from outside the covenant, a distraction that captures attention, a temptation that feeds the dissatisfaction already present. Space becomes not a tool for peace, but a doorway for disloyalty. It is important to understand that trumacy requires closeness, not constant withdrawal. Healthy individuals may need time to breathe, but healthy relationships require consistent connection. To repeatedly insist on distance without seeking resolution is to weaken the very bond that was meant to provide strength. Intimacy is not built by walls. It is built by bridges. When someone chooses walls, it shows that their heart is already drifting and their words are simply reflecting the direction of their loyalty. This kind of withdrawal is often defended with good-sounding excuses. I just need to figure things out on my own. I don't want to talk right now. need to focus on myself. While self-reflection is valuable, when it becomes a pattern of avoidance, it ceases to be growth and becomes selfishness. True growth within a covenant includes communication, honesty, and shared healing. Isolation, when used as an escape, denies the other person the chance to understand, to walk alongside, to repair together. It becomes a one-sided move that starves the relationship of what it needs most openness. The danger in this behavior is feel like betrayal at first. It doesn't look like abandonment. It doesn't carry a drama of a sudden exit. Instead, it operates slowly, almost invisibly, but betrayal rarely begins loudly. It often begins quietly, with gradual silence, reduced attention, and subtle withdrawal. By the time it is recognized, the bond has already grown fragile, and the intimacy has already been replaced with suspicion or distance. Words about needing space have become a pattern of pushing away, and the covenant is weakened with every repetition. When the tongue begins to speak of distance, the heart should immediately be examined. Am I using this as an honest need for rest? Or am I building an excuse for detachment? Am I making room for healing? Or am I preparing ground for unfaithfulness? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary because between healthy space and destructive distance is thin. And when crossed, it can shift an entire relationship from stability to collapse. The truth is, intimacy cannot flourish where walls are constantly built. Loyalty cannot survive where connection is intentionally reduced. Love cannot deepen where silence is used as a weapon. Relationships thrive on presence, not absence, on openness, not secrecy. If there is a need for rest, it should be communicated with clarity and not used as a tool to create suspicion or doubt. If there is a need for reflection, it should lead back to stronger unity, not further separation. Otherwise, the repeated claim for distance becomes nothing more than a mask for disengagement. Every covenant requires vulnerability. To share life with someone means to allow them access not only to your strengths, but also to your weaknesses. When that access is consistently denied under the banner of space, what you are really doing is shutting the other, a person, out of your journey. And when they are excluded long enough, instead, the covenant itself begins to dissolve. That is why it is so important to guard against the miss of distance. A healthy pause can refresh a soul, but an unhealthy withdrawal destroys a bond. It is not wrong to want quiet moments, but it is wrong to weaponize them, to turn them into excuses, to use them as hiding places for disloyalty. Words that ask for space must be weighed carefully because they carry the power to either heal or harm. In the end, the truth always comes out. If distance is being sought for healing, the fruit will be restoration and renewed strength. But if distance is being sought for escape, the fruit will be secrecy, betrayal, and loss. The heart may not realize what the lips are revealing, but the pattern is clear. When intimacy is replaced with withdrawal, when presence is replaced with absence, when openness is replaced with walls, the covenant is already in danger. And unless that behavior is confronted and corrected, what began as a simple request for room will end as a permanent separation.